Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of my lupus story. First and foremost, I just want to thank everyone who had taken the time to watch my first lupus video, my lupus story introduction video. It was so exciting. I got so much positive feedback from it and so many sweet comments and messages. So again, thank you so much for watching that video. But I will say, if you haven't watched that video yet, I would highly suggest to watch that video first before continuing on with this video, just so you'll have a better understanding of my lupus background. I did mention in the first video that I have had lupus for many years now, so I have a very complicated lupus story. And because of this, I will be breaking down my lupus story into different videos just for clarity and so that you are all able to follow my timeline a little bit better. This video right now will be the start of my lupus nephritis diagnosis. And my lupus nephritis is basically the bulk of my whole lupus experience. It is something I have been struggling for many years and that I am currently struggling with. So there is a lot to say. And like I mentioned in the first video, I'm trying to make these videos as detailed as I can. I want to be very informative, share resources, tips and advice, just so that other lupus warriors can relate. Because of that, I will actually be breaking down my lupus nephritis story into 2 parts. So this will be part 1. Again, there is a lot for me to say. And again, I apologize for the lighting. I am using natural lighting, so the lighting will be changing throughout the video. And again, there is construction going on outside, so I do apologize for the extra background noise. But we're just gonna ignore all of that and move on. So let's get started. So I'm gonna start off my lupus nephritis story with fall of 2009. That is when I started college at UC Davis. And I'm from the Bay Area, more so East Bay to be exact. And I chose to go to UC Davis because it was still far enough away from home for me to still get that college experience, but close enough to home where I was still able to go home every weekend if I wanted to, or even during the week if I wanted to, which was really convenient. It was only about 45 minutes to an hour away from each other. And I moved into a dorm with my good friend Chrissy, who I've known since middle school, and we actually went to high school together. So that made it even more convenient to know that I was, starting off college with someone I was already comfortable with. And so moving along to the beginning of 2010, that is when I noticed things were getting a little weird. I noticed it around my birthday time, which is the beginning of February. My husband Kevin, who was my boyfriend during that time, wanted to surprise me and bring my best friends from back home to visit me in Davis. And I just remember, getting ready and then noticing my shoes weren't fitting correctly. And then I noticed that it was because my feet and ankles were really swollen. But I went forward with my whole birthday weekend, contacted my rheumatologist a couple days later, told him what was going on, so he ordered labs. And then a couple days after that, he contacted me with the results and was basically like, hey, you're showing signs of some kidney troubles. So he basically referred me to a nephrologist. And a nephrologist is a physician who specializes in kidneys. So I met with that nephrologist, and that nephrologist kind of emphasized hey, your kidneys are basically leaking protein, and that's why you're experiencing all of this feet swelling. So he wanted me to do a 24-hour urine collection. And a 24-hour urine collection is exactly what it sounds like. So I basically went to the lab that same day and picked up this giant container where I basically had to pee in a cup for 24 hours and transfer all of that urine into a large container. And I did this over the weekend while I was staying at my mom's, because you actually have to refrigerate the urine. And luckily she had a mini fridge, so that's what I used. So again, I peed in a cup and I transferred all of the urine into that large container for 24 hours, and I turned it back into the lab. And then met with my nephrologist after getting those results. And then he basically emphasized like, hey, you know, you're showing signs of, you know, some kidney activity. Basically, my lupus was attacking my kidneys, and he wanted me to get a kidney biopsy just so that we would have a better understanding of what type of class of lupus nephritis I have. And there are several different classes, or I guess categories, you can kind of place like your, I don't want to say kidney damage, but basically kidney activity. The classes range from 1 through 6. I only really know my class, and I will say I am not going to explain all of them. What had helped me during that time was doing a lot of research and finding the website lupus.org, which is an amazing website. I actually still use it to this day. I will post the link below, but that is basically my go-to website, and it was my go-to especially with my whole lupus nephritis diagnosis, because it explained a lot. It explained more in detail of the kidney biopsy procedure and the different classes, and really explained, you know, my specific class. So again, I'll put the link below. And so yeah, so my nephrologist emphasized all of this, explained the procedure, and then I basically scheduled my kidney biopsy. So my kidney biopsy was scheduled on a Friday. I believe it was the weekend of President's Day, because we had that following Monday off from school. So I just remember going to Oakland Kaiser with my mom. And a little bit more background, all of my original doctors were at Richmond Kaiser, but apparently they don't do the kidney biopsies there. So again, my mom and I went to Oakland Kaiser. And I just remember before going there, you know, my mom and I were a little unsure of how much everything was gonna cost. So I just remember my mom bringing hella cash and then like having her checkbook ready. And then we go in and we check in and we paid a $100 copayment. And I just remember during that time I was like, wow, that's actually pretty cheap. But yeah, so after checking in, we got brought to a room where I got dressed in a surgical gown, and you know, I even wore like a surgical cap. And then I just remember my mom taking a picture of me, and then, you know, I met with a nurse who kind of explained the procedure again. And then Kevin met with us at the hospital after that. And then I got sedated and was brought into the operating room where I got my kidney biopsy. And a biopsy in general is basically where you would collect a tissue sample in an area of interest where it's presenting kind of a health concern, right? So I got brought into the operating room where I was turned on my stomach, and they basically inserted a long needle through my back. And the procedure doesn't take that long. Like, I believe a kidney biopsy only takes about 30 minutes. Like, it's a really, really quick procedure. So again, they inserted the long needle through my back and used an ultrasound to kind of find my kidney, and then they collected a tissue sample. And I just remember hearing these clicking noises and then being shaken. And I just remember after being shaken, I opened my eyes, because I remember watching myself being turned over again. And then I just remember like seeing all of these lights, seeing all of these people in like baby blue, you know, having like you know, I guess it was like everyone in the operating room who were wearing the baby blue surgical gown, the mask, and the surgical hat. And I just remember like watching all of the lights as I was being brought back into the original room I was with, where my mom and Kevin were waiting. And we had to stay in the hospital for, you know, a couple of hours after the procedure, because I had to be monitored for like internal bleeding. They did like a couple of labs in between. And then again, we checked in early in the morning, and then by the time we left the hospital, it was already nighttime. So, so that was my first kidney biopsy. So I got to rest for that entire weekend, and I still went back to school a couple of days after that. And I just remember my nephrologist contacting me a week after the procedure and stated that I had class 4 lupus nephritis, which is still considered chronic, but not enough of a health concern for me to need dialysis or enough for me to need a kidney transplant. But it was enough of a concern for me to start chemotherapy. So I started a chemotherapeutic treatment with a drug called Cytoxan, which I did for the first 3 months, and then I started a different drug after that. My nephrologist did emphasize to me that Cytoxan does have a lot of side effects. One that he really emphasized was infertility. So he did state that Cytoxan does decrease your fertility rate, but because of my age and because, you know, it was the first time I was taking Cytoxan, it shouldn't decrease it a lot. But I just remember thinking like, damn, I'm hella young, like I wasn't even thinking about that stuff yet. But it still hurt my feelings during that time. I'll actually get more into detail about like infertility later on, because it got brought back up again. But yeah, so I started Cytoxan. I apologize, I don't remember how many milligrams I was given, but I was also advised to take prednisone. I was taking high doses of prednisone, so 60 milligrams, and then I continued on with my Plaquenil. So my crazy, stubborn, hardworking, ambitious ass still decided to continue on with college, even though I started chemotherapy. And what was really difficult about it was that so Davis is the largest university in California because it is both a graduate and undergraduate school, and the campus takes up a lot of land. So a lot of classes are really far apart from each other, and so it's known as a biking school or like a biking community. But because, you know, I'm so not a biker, I walked to all of my classes. And the way that my kidney disease works is that the more active you are, or I guess the more, you know, on your feet that you are, the more that my kidney was being active, therefore the more protein I was leaking, therefore the more water weight I was gaining. And I kid you not, I literally gained about 20 pounds of water weight in such a small amount of time. My body just stretched out. And it didn't help that I was also taking high doses of prednisone, so my face blew up as well. So that was just really awkward. And then I just remember like the water always being distributed like unevenly. So say for example, if I slept on my left side, I would wake up the next day and a lot of the water moved more towards my left side. So my left side was a lot heavier. And I just remember, you know, walking to my dorm with, you know, my roommate Chrissy and my friend Harold, and, you know, we had to walk up to the second floor because my dorm didn't have an elevator. And I just remember, you know, sitting on my bed and then my friend Harold going, "Why are you breathing like that?" And I just look at him like, I'm so tired, like, you know, having to walk up all of those stairs and just carrying all that extra water weight, or just that extra weight that I wasn't used to, like, really took a lot out of me. But yeah, and it was really difficult in my dorm because, Chrissy and I had a room on the second floor, but the women's bathroom was located on the first and third floor. And well, another thing I forgot to mention was I was also put on diuretics, and diuretics actually makes you pee a lot because, you know, I had to pee out all this extra water weight. So every time I needed to go to the bathroom, I either had to go to the first floor or the third floor, and it was becoming so tiring because, I kid you not, I was peeing so much, like every hour, a few times within an hour. Like, I peed a lot. And so it got to the point where, like, I gave up and I just started using the boys' bathroom on the second floor. It was whatever. So then I finished off that quarter at Davis, and then I started spring break. And that whole 1 week on spring break helped so much. I was on bed rest, and because I wasn't on my feet or, you know, being active, and I was also on the diuretics, my body was finally kind of like shrinking down to normal size again. And then I just remember during that week, my grandma stayed with us a lot, you know, just to help my mom, you know, watch over me. But there was, you know, one Sunday, I want to say it was the Sunday before I had to go back to school, but my mom and grandma decided to go to church. And, you know, church doesn't take that long. It's only about an hour. I think at most they were gone for about 2 hours. But I just remember being awake before they left, and then going back to sleep after they left. And I just remember, like, not being able to breathe. And I just remember struggling to get air and then panicking, but seeing darkness. And I just remember being unsure if I was even alive anymore. And it freaked me out so much. But eventually, you know, I was able to open my eyes, and I noticed that, you know, my neck was swollen. And I think it was because, you know, being on bed rest, I was laying flat all week, and the water basically traveled to my neck, and it was so constricting that I was having a hard time breathing. But no one was home, like, to help me. So finally, when my mom and my grandma came home, I just remember crying to them and telling them, like, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And it was such a scary experience that literally traumatized me until this day. So, like, even when I sleep now, like, if my husband is not next to me, I sleep with the lights on because I get really scared that I will not wake up, you know, going to sleep. So I like knowing that, you know, if my husband's not there, I have the lights on. So, you know, if I am able to open my eyes, I could see light, and that, you know, if my husband was sleeping next to me, I can kind of feel for him if that were to ever happen again. But that was such a traumatizing experience. That is actually literally probably the most traumatizing experience I've had so far with lupus, because I literally wasn't sure if I was alive anymore, and it scared me so much. So after that whole traumatizing experience, I still went back to school for spring quarter. But I just remember that first day of spring quarter, I literally just sat in my dorm and just contemplated on a lot of things, and then getting up and deciding, like, I'm just gonna withdraw from school. And so I remember withdrawing and contacting my uncle, who had a truck during that time, and he came to Davis, picked me up. Everything happened so fast. I literally packed up all my stuff from the dorm and we left. And I just remember like leaving my roommate behind and people questioning like, why did she do that? Because, you know, a lot of people still didn't know what was kind of happening with me. And I just remember going back on bed rest, which helped a lot. But what sucks is that, you know, it took that whole traumatizing experience for me to realize that I needed to do that. And I think if that whole traumatizing experience hadn't had happened, you know, I would still have been going to school. Something else more tragic probably could have happened, but you know, I'm glad I withdrew and took that time off. So I went back on bed rest, but one thing I actually forgot to mention that my doctor told me after he got my biopsy results was, you know, things I had to change within my diet. So my doctor basically emphasized to me that I had to increase my protein intake because my kidneys were leaking too much protein. I really kind of like had to balance that out. But what was difficult during that time was that I was pescatarian during that time. So I made that decision on my own because I basically took a food production class at UC Berkeley the summer before my junior year of high school. And I just remember reading a lot of articles and watching a lot of videos on meat production, and it freaked me out so much. I literally woke up one day and decided to stop eating meat, but I wasn't brave enough to go like completely vegan or vegetarian. So I didn't give up seafood, and that's why I decided to be a pescatarian instead. So I was basically pescatarian up until my lupus nephritis diagnosis, because I was told I had to increase my protein intake. So I started eating meat right away. It gave me upset stomach for the first couple of times, but my body got used to it. And then I was also advised to be put on a low sodium diet. And this was because salt retains water, and again, because my body was retaining so much water, we had to control that. So I was put on a low sodium diet, and what was really difficult was that, you know, I'm Filipino, and so like all the Filipino dishes got nothing but salt in it, and my mom was having such a hard time. The way that my mom took it was that, you know, she would just cook my regular meals, but just not add salt to it and just buy products that said low sodium. So my mom really didn't get it. And it's not like, you know, I had enough energy to like really cook for myself and whatnot. So that was really difficult to deal with. And then another thing that my doctor advised me on doing was that I had to decrease my water intake. Again, because I was retaining so much water, he didn't want me to, you know, basically intake too much water. So I was limited to 1 glass of water a day, which was so hard because one thing I forgot to mention in the first video of a side effect that I personally experienced with prednisone is that it gives me this weird metal taste in my mouth. So it makes me crave like drinking things with a lot of flavor in it because the metal taste is just so annoying. So I mean, just to know that, for one, I was on a low sodium diet, so all my food tasted super bland, and then two, I couldn't even like drink anything to like soothe it. So I chewed on ice a lot during that time. But those are basically the top 3 things in my diet that my doctor kind of, you know, emphasized that I had to do. So aside from all of this and, you know, being on bed rest, I noticed that I was physically showing signs of all of the like chemo side effects. So aside from the body swelling and the moon face, I started losing my hair, which was really heartbreaking. I was losing so much hair, like in patches. I had a lot of bald spots, so you could see my scalp. And the way that I dealt with it was I bought clip-on hair tracks, which I used to clip to the front here and then throw it back to hide all of the bald spots in the back. And then I wore a headband to cover all the clips. And I also did the Rogaine for Women hair treatment, as well as take biotin and multivitamins to help with the hair growth, which actually helped a lot. I feel like my hair actually grew back thicker after that. And I did attempt to buy a wig, but I felt very uncomfortable with it. I just feel like it looked very unnatural. I was super self-conscious with it on, so I just stuck with the tracks. After a while, it just became really hot to wear, so my hair grew enough for me to like kind of take my hair in front and do like this weird puff. But that was later along the line. And then another side effect that I experienced was my nails were turning black and super brittle. So I kept having to cut my nails super short. And luckily during that time, the whole stamp nail designs were super in. So my cousins were coming over a lot to like do my nails, so I was able to hide all of that. And then my skin turned gray. So I was very like grayish green in pictures. And another thing that happened to me, which I think was just the side effect from stress, was I like broke out in like acne. So I ended up getting like a lot of acne scars where I had to like get a series of microdermabrasion to like help that. So yeah, so those were some of the major side effects that I experienced with the chemotherapy. So one day while I was on bed rest, because I was home a lot, I just remember standing in front of the mirror and just not recognizing the person in front of me and just being so frustrated to know that all of this was happening to me. And I just remember like questioning, like, why me? And I just remember like one day I went to Kevin's house and he had to leave me at his house for a couple of hours for some reason. I forgot why, but I just remember being at home with his mom, Nerissa, and I just remember crying to her, just so depressed and sad that all of this was happening to me. And I just remember her comforting me and just saying like everything's gonna be okay, and just her telling me like, hey, you should talk to my best friend because she also has lupus. And I just remember thinking like, oh, is this the auntie that Kevin was talking about that has lupus? But come to find out later, it was actually a different auntie. But yeah, so Nerissa introduced me to her best friend, Lisa, who was also diagnosed with lupus at a young age. And I just remember like thinking, oh my God, thank you for sending me this guardian angel, because I just remember like praying so hard to God for answers, and he literally sent me a guardian angel who guided me so much in the very beginning. And I just remember like one thing that really stuck out to me in my first conversation with Lisa was that she was still able to have a son while having lupus, and I just remember that giving me so much hope for my future. But Lisa is so inspiring. She had guided me so much in the beginning and still is like an inspiration to me to this day. And it was so exciting to tell her that I was doing all of this, lupus YouTube video thing, and I'm excited to actually team up with her later in the future. But I just really want to, take the time to thank Lisa for everything you have done for me in the very beginning. You are literally the first person I ever met with lupus, and I just remember you giving me so much confidence and really kind of brought me back to reality and gave me so much hope to know that, you know, everything could be okay. So thank you so much, Lisa. I can't wait to team up with you later. So a couple of months passed, and you know, I was finishing up my whole 3 months with Cytoxan, and I just remember feeling so much better. And I just remember signing up for summer school at a local community college and going back to work. I was working at the movie theaters during that time. I just remember wanting to feel normal again and kind of just get my life back on track. I didn't want to feel like I was falling too far behind in college, knowing that I took that quarter off, that spring quarter off. So I remember doing summer school, I was working at the movie theaters, and then I went back to Davis that following fall. And then, mind you, all of this was happening again in 2010. So moving along to the beginning of 2011, that was during the time Kevin was actually preparing to join the military. And he made this decision on his own because, you know, he tried the whole college thing, wasn't feeling it, and really wanted to kind of do something for himself to kind of have more of a stable future. And so he was in the process of joining the US Navy. And, you know, February comes along, which again is my birthday, and Kevin ends up proposing to me. And it was such a big surprise. I completely didn't know. And everyone around me actually knew. Kevin actually asked my mom, grandma, aunts, and uncles for permission first. And he really brought up, you know, just wanting to marry me and wanting to take care of me. And him joining the military was going to help him do all of that. And my uncle is a retired, you know, retired from the Army. So he really understood, you know, what the military had to offer as far as like benefits, especially medical. And my family was like all for it. They loved Kevin from the very beginning. You know, Kevin has nothing but respect for my family and for me. And for him to kind of bring up like, hey, like, I know that Sarah is going through all of these health concerns, but I am going to do something about it, and I'm going to join the military, and I'm going to take care of her because I love her. Like, that was something that my family took as a blessing. So they gave him their blessing, and Kevin proposed, and we were engaged. And 2 weeks after that, he left for boot camp. So he left for boot camp, and after boot camp, he did a whole mini 3-month deployment. So that gave us a taste of what deployment life was going to be like. And then he ended up getting stationed in San Diego, which was really nice because, you know, it was still close enough for us to like alternate and visit each other's. So 2011 was also the same year I met other lupus warriors in college. So I met my friends Bernadette and Kim. So the way that I met Bernadette was my friend Ken Gar approached me one day and was like, hey, there's this new girl who, you know, I met, and she was kind of a little stressed out at one point and kind of confessed to me that she has lupus. So I told her that you have lupus and, you know, maybe you guys can talk. So I met Bernadette, and then she shared her lupus story. And what was interesting was that she stated that her twin sister, Bianca, also has lupus. And I just remember thinking like, wow, like, is this hereditary? Like, this is so interesting. And then, you know, that following fall, my housemates and I were getting some new housemates. And then I just remember my cousin Lauren, who was my actual roommate, we shared rooms. She was, you know, at our apartment, and Kim and Kim's mom came, you know, to kind of check out the apartment. I wasn't there during that time, but I guess Kim's mom was like really stressed out and was like, you know, my daughter has lupus, you know, this is gonna be her first time away from home. And then my cousin Lauren was like, my cousin has lupus, you know, don't worry, my cousin's doing well, blah, blah, blah. So when I finally came back to the apartment, I met Kim, and I just remember thinking like, oh my God, like we can totally support each other through this whole college experience. I'm totally here for you. And Kim is still my really, really, really good friend to this day. So moving along to 2012. So 2012 had a lot of ups and downs for me. It started off really well and then didn't end off so well. So I basically turned 21 that year, which was really exciting. And I also got hired at MAC Cosmetics, which was also really exciting. And Kevin and I actually got married that year as well. We got married August 3rd of 2012. So the way that it worked was I had summer school during that time, and I just remember having my final on a Thursday. Kevin flew in Thursday night, and we stayed in a hotel in San Francisco. The next day we got married at San Francisco City Hall. It was a really small wedding. Only our immediate family was invited. But I mean, we're like hella Filipino, so our family's huge. So our immediate family still ended up to be like 30 people. So the 30 of us, you know, did the whole wedding. And then the following day, his parents threw us a family party at their house. And I just remember, like, my body was really, really swollen that day. And I just remember, like, looking back at pictures and thinking, like, damn, I was, like, thick. And, you know, that following Sunday, Kevin left to go back to San Diego. And, you know, I contacted my doctor right away, and it was like, you know, my body is swollen. And he basically, you know, did some labs and was like, hey, you're basically relapsing. So I was put on prednisone again. I, you know, was taking high doses of prednisone. I don't remember if he gave me any other medications, but I just remember doing prednisone again. And I want to say maybe he increased my CellCept dose. Oh, sorry, I believe I didn't mention this earlier, but basically after Cytoxan, I got started on CellCept, and I basically had to continue on with the CellCept medication until I actually recovered from the lupus nephritis. So yeah, so I dealt with the relapse, and during this time I was also transitioning insurances. So I just remember during that time there was a lot of changes within my health insurance. Like, I used to get labs done every month, and then my labs were always free, and then all of a sudden my mom and I, we were paying like $200 to $300 for all the labs I was taking each month. And then my co-payment went from like $20 to like $35, and it even got to the point where like I would do my labs and then not even physically go see my doctor anymore, and he would just tell me my results over the phone because he understood that things were getting really expensive. And then, you know, finally, a few months after that, I finally transitioned over to TRICARE, which was, you know, the military insurance. And then moving along to 2013 was also a really big year for me. It was the year I was supposed to officially graduate from Davis, but, you know, because I had taken that time off, and then I changed my major, I had to do 2 extra quarters. So my roommates basically all graduated, and, you know, I still did the Filipino ceremony, so I still like did a graduation ceremony with them. But basically after that summer they all left, and then the fall of 2013 I moved in with my friends, 2 guys and 2 gays, which was so much fun. But yeah, so I had to do an additional 2 quarters. So I know I mentioned work and school a few times throughout my story, and you know, I want to get into further detail with it. So I actually will be doing 2 separate videos for both of these subjects: how I dealt with lupus in college and how I deal with lupus and work. So I will get started on those 2 videos after I'm done with part 2 of my lupus nephritis video. So keep a lookout for that. So the end of 2013, my body started swelling up again, so I knew it was coming. Did labs, and my nephrologist said that I relapsed. And this was basically my 2nd relapse within my whole kidney disease. And mind you, this was actually a new nephrologist during that time. Remember, I transitioned over to TRICARE, which is the military health insurance. So I was actually being seen at a military hospital at Travis Air Force Base in Fairfield. And that new nephrologist highly suggested a 2nd kidney biopsy just to get a better understanding of what type of changes my kidney was going through, and wanted to have a better idea of like the best treatment to put me on. So at the beginning of 2014, that is when I got my 2nd kidney biopsy. It was literally a couple days before my birthday, which was really stressful because it was also my very last quarter at Davis, you know, but I still fought through it. I still went through with the kidney biopsy. I still went to my classes, still did all my papers and whatnot. And I am proud to say that with all of that happening, I was still able to finish off that quarter at Davis, and I was able to obtain my undergraduate degree. And so now we're kind of at the halfway point of my lupus nephritis story. I'm actually going to stop it here because there's so much for me to say in part 2, and I don't want to make these videos like super long. Plus, I'm such a YouTube rookie. Like, this takes so much time, and you know, I use natural lighting, so I'm super timed on this. But thank you again for watching. Keep a lookout for part 2 of my lupus nephritis story. And again, thank you everyone, you know, for all the support throughout the years, family, friends, my husband Kevin. I'm so glad I'm doing this because I feel like I'm really reaching out, and it's kind of helping me more as a person in dealing with my disease. It's making me realize a lot. So I'm really happy that I finally started to do this. I'm really excited to you know, get started on the next couple of videos so that again, you guys are able to follow my timeline and my story. So again, thank you so much. What do I say? What do YouTubers say? Like, right? Like, subscribe, share, right? I'm doing it right? Again, thank you.